This podcast is part of the C-Suite Radio Network, turning the volume up on business.
We all know most executive level positions are not posted or advertised. So the big question is this: if those 100K plus jobs are not posted or advertised, how do you go about your job search in a way so you can find the right companies, connect with the right people, and land your next ideal opportunity as quickly as possible and without compromise? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Chris Kirkpatrick, and welcome to Executive Job Search Secrets. Hey, it's Chris Kirkpatrick, and welcome to the Executive Job Search Secrets podcast. And for this episode, I want to talk about the 10-step process that we walk our clients through to be able to develop an amazing executive resume that actually gets results. Oftentimes you'll hear me say a lot in the podcast, and if we ever talk, it really doesn't come down to the resume in a lot of situations. I kind of always say a resume is one of those essential things that you need, but you can't rely upon. And it really comes down to relationships and process and so on and so forth. But I think the development of your executive resume and all your marketing materials, all your marketing materials are developed based on your executive resume. And if you go through the process effectively of developing your resume, then you're going to find that it has a pretty drastic impact on how you navigate your search in general. And so let's just kind of get into this, and I'll create some dialogue as I go through here. But so there are a couple stages of your resume. First and foremost, you have the writing your resume phase, which is important. Obviously, you want to make sure, and I'm going to get into that. But to start off, you want to make sure that you go through and navigate the process of mining the right information and really being intentional, starting with the end in mind and developing how you want to position yourself in the marketplace. So the first thing that you need to do is go through a targeting and research component of development, right? So you think about it this way. I always kind of tell people this: if you stand for nothing, you get nothing every time, right? And I think what the number one challenge that I find that executives have in their job search is they feel like nobody's responding to their resume. Now, that could be strategy, implementation, that could be one of the issues, or it could be the fact that your resume is just too generic and it doesn't differentiate you in the marketplace. And so too often people write generic resumes, they write generic cover letters, and it's not speaking specifically to the people that they want to sell themselves to. Because make no mistakes about this is a sales job. You are selling yourself for an opportunity. You are an investment opportunity for a company, and you need to position yourself as such. And so remember, companies don't have time to kind of sift through all the details. You're really going to get just a short period of time in front of their eyes to stand out, speak a story very quickly in your resume or whatever marketing documents you get in front of them with. But specifically for the resume, you might have 7 to 10 seconds of attention. And so if your resume doesn't captivate them and stand out from the crowd, it's going to be put in the recycle bin. So that's the first thing, is taking a step back, being really intentional, and making sure that you are targeting the right companies, that you are doing research on those companies, that you are clear around who you're targeting. And when you are, then it kind of leads into step 2. Now, step 2 is personal branding and value proposition. Now, there's a couple components to this. When you're clear on the companies that you want to target, now that also has an impact on how you want to position yourself, what your brand is, how you want to communicate and articulate your value proposition. Now, when you combine those two things together, step 1 and step 2 together, now you could see they build off each other a little bit. The personal branding and value proposition communication component to this, you have to design that and develop all that documentation and all of the communication around that to the specific organizations. That way you're using industry lingo, company lingo, and when you do the research on the companies, that has a pretty significant impact on how you want to position yourself as a product in the marketplace, and how you have yourself branded out there. So the third thing that you want to think about before you get into actually writing your resume is really thinking about your success stories, your career success stories, if you will. Now, when you go through here, think about this as you're thinking about your stories. Think about, how were you able to capture profitable advances for your last employer? How were you able to help them achieve goals, hit targets? What were the problems that you had? What were the actions you took? And what were the results that you achieved with that organization? That's a fantastic kind of process to follow. And if you do that, then you are going to be able to have these stories as the backbone of your resume. They're going to be what leads to the quantifiable results and the statistics and everything that's relevant. But remember, stories sell. Everybody makes decisions emotionally, and then they validate with logic, and stories are what gain people's attention really quickly. Now, knowing how to put those stories inside of a resume is a bit of an art form, but that is something. Before getting into writing, you want to make sure that you get 1 through 3. Steps 1, 2, 3 is making sure that you're doing the right targeting and research to make sure you're going after the right types of organizations and companies that you're looking for. Make sure that when you do that, now you build your personal brand and communication of your value proposition around that, and then think about what your career success stories are before you start writing. Now, for number 4, that's when you're going to start writing your executive resume. The big thing here, I always kind of say to start with, and it's just talking about kind of breaking an old paradigm, so to speak, in resume writing, and that is, forget about the objective statement, because the objective statement is something that, quite frankly, is selfish. It's an old way of constructing resumes, and really all an objective statement does is tell an employer that I am looking to grow myself in this way. I'm looking to utilize my expertise in a certain way. And at the end of the day, they don't really care how you want to do what you do. They want to know how what you do will impact them, right? So you want to make sure that you utilize that position on the resume that would typically be where you would place your objective statement traditionally. You want to replace that positioning in your resume with a summary, with your executive summary with that talks a little bit about what you've done, about the quantifiable results that you've had, the type of organizations you've helped, what you stand for, what your mission is, what your why is. And ultimately, remember, this is a sales job. It doesn't matter. It's not about you. It's about what you could do for them. It's about that statement needs to stand out. And that's one of the most important statements to develop, and one of the most important components in your entire resume to develop is that summary statement about who you are, what you do, how you can do it for them, why it matters to them, and really put that together succinctly. So also, when I talk about replacing the summary replacing the objective statement with a summary, really that's the header of your resume. That summary falls in the header where you're going to have your name and your contact information and a little bit about your key statements about you and your branding statements. This summary is going to go right there in the kind of the top quarter to top third of your resume, and make sure that as much as possible from a formatting perspective that this stands out. It pops. There's some sort of design. There's something that draws the eye to it, because that obviously these little things that you can do with your resume design and layout and format, when you want to use that real estate and draw people's eyes to certain components, certain portions of the real estate of your resume, that is going to increase the odds of you garnishing a little more time of the reader of your resume. So number 6 is make sure that your resume is readable, that it is that it reads correctly, that you use good punctuation, that you have it in the right format. So when they open it, you always want to make sure that you have a PDF version and that you also have a Word document. That way when they open it, it's readable. Make sure that it's mobile friendly. Make sure that when they open it on any device that it's going to open in the right formats. Remember, we live in a world today where people are mobile. People are opening documents on tablets, on phones, on laptops, on desktops, with all sorts of different screen sizes and different types of browsers and different types of document reading tools. And so you want to make sure that you have your resume available in all the different formats that will be able to be appealing to the eye, so to speak, and go from there. So number 7 is pretty clear, and if you're not doing this, I would say you're shooting yourself in the foot. Make sure you don't have any typos and grammar mistakes. Just proofread your resume. Go through section by section and do it item by item, meaning go through, check for typos. And that's all you want to do is check for typos. Then go through and just read it out loud and check for grammatical errors, right? Make sure that you have commas in the right places and make sure that you have everything kind of formatted the way that you want from that perspective. But I'm telling you, also, don't rely on spell check, because spell check will only check words that are spelled incorrectly. There are a lot of words in the English language that are spelled differently, but they say the same thing, like where. There is another one, right? So make sure that you're using the right context of the right word on your resume so you don't look foolish. Number 8 is make sure your formatting is consistent and clean. You want to use different colors, but don't use too many types of fonts and colors. You want it to be, once again, readable and cleaned and designed in a way that draws the eyes to places that you want the most attention to. But just make sure from a formatting perspective, as you go through and you have your career history, that you have, whether you use italics or bold or underline or whatever, if you're going to do it for one job, make sure you do it consistently so you create patterns for each job, so you make the reader's job as easy as possible. My rule of thumb is I never want a resume to be more than 2 pages. I know there are different opinions on that, but if at all possible, if your resume goes over 2 pages and becomes 3 pages, I would say that you want to look at maybe reformatting, or maybe you want to look at cutting some stuff and thinking about what is the most relevant information that you want to keep in, and go from there. And so that leads to number 9, which is avoid the information inside of your resume that is not you, that's not personal, that people can't relate to. Remember, you are a brand, you are unique, and you want to differentiate yourself in the marketplace. So you don't want to just kind of be bland, and you don't want to use very generic terms and phrases and so on and so forth. You want to make sure you're positioning yourself as that thought leader, as an expert, as the person who is going to be different than all the people you're competing against. So when you do that, the best way to do this is to write your resume from your own voice. And so make sure that when you go through this, I find that oftentimes when people's resumes do get too long, what's happening is they're using so many generic terms and they're trying to get so much information in there. And I find that when you think about who you are, what problems you solve, the companies that you're targeting, and where your talents and gifts are strongest, where your value is highest, if you focus on those areas and write it from your own voice, that's where you're going to have the most power. And I get it. Sometimes it's hard to see the forest through the trees with that, and that's where you need assistance, or maybe you want to talk to somebody. If that's the case, feel free to give us a call, and I'm sure we can help you work through some of that. But that is a big component that I think is important to make sure you don't fall into that trap, because I see so many resumes that fall into that trap. So number 10 is avoid passive verbs and repetitive job descriptions. We have a sheet that we actually created on power verbs that you can utilize in your resume in different places to increase effectiveness and increase your ability to stand out, and to highlight your talents and experiences. I always kind of say avoid the terms like boring phrases like responsible for or led a team of. There are much more impactful, dynamic ways to write and to describe your experiences and your accomplishments. And so make sure you don't fall into that trap. And if you do have questions around that, make sure that you reach out to us and you get a hold of our power verb worksheet, because that is something that you're going to want to go through. One of the rules that I always kind of tell people is that, yes, while your resume needs to have relevant keywords, one of the things at the executive level that's important to understand is that most of the time you're not going to be dealing with the ATS system. You're not going to be submitting your resume to the job postings a whole lot or ATS system. So don't write it for an ATS system. If you find yourself finding a job posting that you want to submit for, you can absolutely take your resume and customize it and add relevant keywords that will help you get through the ATS system. But in the general context of how you're going to use your resume, do not think you need to make it super keyword dense, because that's just going to make it longer. It's going to make it not read as well. It's not going to be as clean. Honestly, it's going to be less effective with the key decision makers that ultimately are going to wind up reading it. So that is number 1 through 10 on the 10 steps, 10 things that you need to consider from a process perspective that when you develop your executive resume. And so if you have any questions about any of this, we actually have some of the best resume writers in the world, but I'd be happy to talk to you. I know a lot of people have a lot of concerns and questions about how to position themselves, how to develop their own brand, write their own resume. Some people are really good at it, and some people have a challenging time with it. And I think that's one of my favorite things to do, is to talk to people and ask good questions, ask tough questions that get you thinking about your career in a bit of a different way. So if that's a conversation you'd love to have, feel free, reach out, go to careernextagency.com, just submit your information. I'd love to get on the phone with you, have a conversation, no obligation with anything. Obviously, we have our services, we have the products and tools that we offer for people to help them become more effective and efficient with their job search. But I love having conversations, and kind of my gift to everybody I talk to is to give them a 15 to 30 minute conversation about what's going on, what are they doing, what are they looking for, what are they struggling with, what are the challenges that they have, what are the holes that they have in their job search, and ultimately how can we give them some guidance on how to plug those holes. Sometimes that means working with us, and sometimes it doesn't. So anyway, I hope that helps. I hope it makes sense. I hope you can take this information and implement it in your search. And until next time, go out there, have a blessed, inspirational day, and we'll talk to you soon. Are you tired of struggling with your job search? Are you having a hard time connecting with key decision makers, or struggling with knowing how to communicate your brand more effectively? Or maybe there's something else holding you back. Either way, our team is here to help and would love to give you a free 30-minute consult to hear about what you're doing, what you're looking for, and give you some advice on how to get there more effectively. All you have to do is go to www.careernextagency.com, and we'll talk to you soon.
Like what you just heard? Visit c-suiteradio.com. C-Suite Radio, turning the volume up on business.